Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Jade Dynasty Season 3 based on novel. So let's start. Morning, a cool wind gently blowing at Qingyun Hill, causing the mountain mist to slowly turn, like a thin gauze floating in the dense forest. The three-way intersection outside the Founder Ancestral Hall, ghostly, Mr. Ghost and the Cleaner Elder stood in a triangle, facing each other in a delicate atmosphere. The wrinkles on the old man's face moved, speaking slowly in a husky voice. Both are not from Qingyun Hill. Why did you come secretly to this sacred Qingyun place, and for what reason? Ghostly was silent, his eyes assessed the old man for a moment. Mr. Ghost stood 6 feet from him, with both of their skills. They need not fear anyone, but between them, very obviously neither trusted the other. However, at this moment, Mr. Ghost's eyes, hidden behind the black veil, had been staring at the old man, his eyes bright and piercing, looked like it had another strange feeling. That old man seemed to sense something, turned shakily around and looked at Mr. Ghost, said, "This master, you have been staring at this senile, do you perhaps have any words to say?" Mr. Ghost suddenly laughed and said, "You are just an old man guarding Qingyun Hill Founder's Ancestral Hall. Why did you have to meddle? This young man here," he pointed at Ghostly, said, "he has long heard of Qingyun Hill Illusory Moon Cave and wants to go in and take a look. Will this old gentleman let him pass?" Ghostly, standing at a distance, suddenly coldly sneered, said, "Before coming up, you and I have already agreed. I will enter Illusory Moon Cave to distract Qingyun sect while you will take the opportunity to sneak into Qingyun Founder's Ancestral Hall, destroy all of Qingyun sect ancestors' spirit tablets and humiliate Qingyun sect. Why is it that when we are here, you are still not going in?" Mr. Ghost stifled, looked at Ghostly. Ghostly's face was solemn, his expression serious and stern. Even if he was to refute his words, it would also be hard for others to believe. Mr. Ghost looked at him for a long time, as though giving a wry smile, slightly shook his head. The old man looked at Ghostly and looked at Mr. Ghost again, his face gradually turned cold, the sharp gaze in his eyes slowly turned bright, indifferently said, "It seems like no matter what, both have ill intentions against Qingyun. Just that Qingyun sacred ground, senile me have been looking after for many years. If both intend to wreak havoc, will have to be first over my body." He said it so indifferently, facing the two mysterious and unfamiliar characters, slowly straightened his body. In the dense forest after the early morning, the distant sounds of crisp bird cries suddenly paused and disappeared. Only the mountain mist which filled the mountain was still drifting, lingering around them. Decades of time in life seemed to quietly flow past in this stillness, became the crow's feet at one's eyes. Mr. Ghost suddenly said, "How is your left hand, still good?" Ghostly and the old man were stunned at the same time. Ghostly naturally did not understand the reason for Mr. Ghost's sudden words, but the old man obviously trembled, both of his eyes staring at Mr. Ghost, unable to move. In the early morning, in the mist, the old man stared for a long time, suddenly heaved a long sigh, the stunned expression slowly disappeared, unhurriedly said, "It's you." Mr. Ghost smiled and said, "It's me." He paused, his eyes looking at the old man's face, even his voice carried some emotion, said, "These past few years, why did you age so much? Look at you like this. Who would still recognize you as the once famous Qingyun sect Wan Jianyi?" The old man heard the words, Wan Jianyi, his body suddenly trembled, as if the 3 words were like sharp knives, one by one stabbed into his heart. Even his age-scarred face revealed agitation rarely seen. Wan Jianyi, Wan Jianyi. He muttered the name, complicated and anguish expressions appeared on his face. Ghostly frowned. Wan Jianyi, this name, he had heard it before when he was still Qingyun sect disciple, just that he never expected this legendary presumed dead for many years figure would still be alive, and that the one which caused an internal strife among the Qingyun various branch leaders and Taoist King Song who because of that person, betrayed Qingyun, would actually turned into such a humble old man. The cold wind blew past, brushed past the clothes of the 3 people. In this misty surreal mountain, the past seemed to reverberate around here too. Until, the once Wan Jianyi, once viewed the world with arrogance, now instead a wrinkled old man, slowly looked up. Pale a light sound issued from his hands. Ghostly and Mr. Ghost both looked over at the same time, saw light grey powder streaming down, the decrepit broom in Wan Jenny's hand, in his agitated mood, was crushed into powder, scattered onto the ground. The mountain breeze blew, blowing away the powder on the ground little by little. Wan Jenny stared at the residue in his hand, but now disappeared without a trace. Following which, he lifted his head and stared at Mr. Ghost, word by word said, "If it wasn't for you that time, I would have become an invalid. I am indebted to you and I have always remembered it." Mr. Ghost lightly said, "You and I felt like old friends at the first meeting, at Northwest Wildlands, and that Pug monk." Ghostly, who had been standing silently by the side, suddenly shook, his eyes glimmered brightly. Mr. Ghost and Wan Jenny did not notice Ghostly's expression change, continued, "Although the three of us were from different sects, but at least we have made acquaintance once. Now that Pug has passed away for many years and there wasn't any news of you for a long time, unexpectedly we can still meet today. My trip to Qingyun is considered not in vain." His words of feelings conveyed his emotions. The tensed expression on Wan Jenny gradually relaxed, sighed and said, "Yes, I never thought that. I can still meet old friends." Stop there. Halfway through his words, his voice suddenly turned urgent, broke off with a shout. It was Ghostly, who had silently turned around, unwilling to listen to the two of them speaking about the past, walked off by himself towards the illusory moon cave. Wan Jenny sneered. He only raised a hand. His withered palm out of a sudden seemed to become bigger and longer like 1,000 times, grabbed from the back like a giant claw. Ghostly paused his footsteps, did not even turn back. The spot where his wrist was shaking, a flash at the top of his head, a circular image drawn in the air, instantly surged with light. It was Taiji image, dark green light glimmering. Wan Jenny's giant claw was held up by the light, immediately deflected back, but in just this short time, Wan Jenny's withered body was already before Ghostly. A shocked expression once again appeared on his face. Said Taiji Xianqing Wei, "Who exactly are you?" Mr. Ghost's voice was heard from behind, said, "He is an important figure at the current evil sect, Ghost King sect." Ghostly frowned, but still did not speak. Wan Jenny assessed him with a few glances, nodded his head and said, "So you are the Zhong Xiao fan, who was cast out of Qingyun sect 10 years ago, and joined the evil sect?" Ghostly's face like frost, coldly said, "Move." Wan Jenny did not have the slightest intention to give way, but after assessing Ghostly, suddenly sighed and said, "Tian junior brother is actually able to cultivate out a disciple like you. It is really great." Ghostly's expression changed but immediately snorted, his face showing even some arrogance, as if regarding this celebrated Wan Jenny as nothing, strided and walked. Wan Jenny straightened his body, clasped his hands behind, showed not a sign of avoiding. Watching as the two approached nearer, Wan Jenny suddenly frowned, his body rose sharply from the ground. Almost at the same time, the ground below him groaned, instantly cracked, flashing with cold dark green light from the soul devouring, shooting sharply out. Wan Jenny in the air, his body swayed, suddenly with a loud shout, shook the surroundings. He actually bare-handedly grabbed towards the soul devouring which was pursuing over. The sinister orb at the tip of the soul devouring immediately glowed brightly red, lines of dark red strands all lighted up, mixed in the black light, even without hesitation, charged straight ahead. Black gases surged and rolled, red lights flashed darkly, in an instant all around them darkened down, but Wan Jenny unexpectedly charged down, as if the unearthly harsh atmosphere had no effect on him. Ghostly's countenance changed, this level of cultivation and skills, it could be said this was his first time seeing it. Looking like Wan Jenny was about to grab this ominous object in his hands, but in this short moment, suddenly in the black-red light, on the sinister orb, a strange pattern surfaced out deep from within, from small to big, from dark to bright, in an instant standing out from the black air and strange lights, brilliant golden light. It was a Buddhist incantation, a burst of vigorous and pure force, within it a certain strangeness, hit back at Wan Jenny's palm. Wan Jenny and Ghostly moved backwards at the same time. The soul-devouring magical weapon in the air also flew back to Ghostly's hand. Wan Jenny paused in mid-air, his face slightly pale, staring at Ghostly, spoke word by word, the great Brahmin wisdom. Ghostly expressionless, but he was stunned secretly. The level of cultivation of this person in front of him was really unfathomable. These 10 over years, this was the first time he saw someone who was able to resist soul-devouring evil power barehandedly. While he was secretly shocked, he did not know the shock that Wan Jianyi had. Wan Jianyi at that time was already an exceptional rare talent. His skills far surpassed his fellow sex disciples. Other than Reverend Dao Xian, who was comparable to him, he viewed the rest with disdain. Later on, although he met with misfortune one after another, his fate bumpy and rough, but this day facing this junior, that innate air of arrogance in him was still as before. Just that after exchanging moves with Ghost Li, he was really surprised. The evil power of the sinister orb was strange and ferocious, although he looked unharmed, but it had already influenced the agitation of his body's blood. And when Ghost Li displayed the Buddhism true way, the great Brahmin wisdom, merging Taoism and evil sect true ways together as one, perfectly, even him with his level of skills, was at his wits' end, forced to retreat. He could not help, but was greatly shocked. The cold wind, suo, blowing past the scene, the mist gently drifted, looking like it was about to disperse. Wan Jianyi looked at Ghost Li for a long while, nodded his head and said, "It really is every Jiangshan generation has its talent. Didn't expect that in my remaining years, this old man can still meet someone like you. Considered at least heaven did not let me down." Ghost Li frowned, did not quite understand the meaning of his words. Only Mr. Ghost, who was standing at the back, softly sighed once, seemed to be feel the old friend he once had, after many years, that arrogant and obstinate spirit still had not changed. But just when he was sighing, that pair of eyes glimmered with strange glint, staring intently at Wan Jianyi. Ghost Li coldly said, "Make way." Wan Jianyi looked at him, that young man in front of him, cold and arrogant, that expression, suddenly looked so familiar. He suddenly laughed out loud. His expression had that slight bit of forlorn, but soon replaced by lofty sentiments, gave a long laugh and said, "Good, good, good, as expected a young man. The mortals in the world by right should be disregarded. But if you want to cross, then you have to depend on your own ability." Ghost Li, with a long whistle, did not speak much, leapt up. Wan Jianyi's pupils contracted, suddenly moved back, his body flew to the edge of the dense forest, his right hand grabbed one pine tree which a person could wrap one's arms around, with a loud shout. In that instant the surroundings quaked, in the rumbling sounds, the huge pine tree was uprooted, like a giant arm horizontally in the air. Wan Jianyi's hand propping up the giant tree, standing imposingly in mid-air, where was that once wretched stooped appearance? Looking at him, highly spirited and vigorous, his face excited, his features wide opened, it was that unparalleled look of that time. "Come," Wan Jianyi shouted loudly, like a thunder passing by, "you have the sinister orb. Come take a look at my Qingyun giant tree." His body wavered, in that instant the tree moved, woo-woo a sound, in a blink turned extremely swift, the sky was all of the tree's shadow, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, charging over, the urgent sound of the wind, there was no longer other sounds. Ghost Li's face changed greatly, flipped in the tree's shadow, that giant tree was like a giant surging wave, and also like an endless tide, waves after waves, each higher than another, pursuing under the clear sky, the mountain mists also seemed to tremble. The wind passed through the trees, turned into a violent wind, evolved into a vortex in the air, swallowing up the world. Ghost Li was in the heart of the vortex. Surrounding him were the dancing shadows of trees. The strong wind cut his face like knives. It was as if he wasn't careful, he would be cut to pieces by this sharp object. Wan Jianyi was laughing wildly non-stopped, as if once again he was back to the time where he ruled the world, his face expression looking even more excited, all of his attention on Ghost Li. Ghost Li in whirlwind suddenly clenched his teeth, the tree shadow like a mountain looming nearing. This time he did not dodge. Raising his right hand, the soul-devouring glimmering with eerie dark red light flew out, in the hundreds of trees' shadows, with a pu sound, accurately nailed itself on the tree. In that instant demonic power danced, streams of red lights leapt up from the sinister orb, winding past the trunk, where it passed by, the bark split and cracked, broken debris flew up. In that instant, 1/3 of the tree trunk was already devoured by this evil power, but Wan Jianyi was not surprised, instead he laughed, with a long laugh, chopped down with his left hand, the tree trunk brushed past by the invisible wind, immediately like tofu, was cut off. The front part of the trunk enveloped by the red light, issued a moan and dissolved into powder, scattered into the wind. But Wan Jianyi, who was in front, propped up the trunk remnant, like propping the sky, his might and power unexcelled in the world. The sky filled with trees' shadows immediately disappeared, the storm ceased, the violent wind stopped, the entire world seemed to pause in their breaths, all watching that figure flying in the air. He descended from the sky, with a loud shout, raising the trunk rumbled down. The forceful wind shrieked, rushing over with a piercing sound, 3 jongs radius on the ground, with a crashing sound, stones and sands instantly flew out. Only Ghostly alone with his clothes flapping in the wind, his face pale, staring intently at the giant tree descending from the sky. That strange whistle was like thunder shocking the ears, in a blink arrived, Ghostly clenching his teeth tight. Suddenly both of his hands waved around, Taiji image spinning rapidly, rising abruptly up from the top of his head, blocking in front of the thunderous tree trunk. The 2 great forces collided with a crash in mid-air. Even the land and mountains around them also seemed to shake. The ground below Ghostly, his feet had already sank in. The front part of trunk was compressed by the great force of the Taiji Xian Qingwei road, splitted completely, the wood splinters flew out everywhere, in a blink again turned into powder, scattered without a trace. But the trunk still pressed on, stabbing down inch by inch on the Taiji image glimmering in the dark green light. Ghostly's face turned paler, the demonic light of the soul-devouring surged brighter, the Buddhist incantation again appeared, below the Taiji image, golden light shining, laying down another layer. The violent wind whistling, almost nobody could breathe, the wild wind ravaged, the 2 men in the green dense forest mountain fought each other oblivious of everything, each refusing to give way, except that dark figure flickering indistinctly. Wan Jianyi with an impassioned look, even the deep wrinkles right now had all disappeared, as if his time, during his youth many years ago, all returned to his body at this moment. That period of once endless excitement, haughty laughing at the world. He made a long cry to the sky, like a dragon making a roar, that feeling of the violent wind hitting his face, like his entire body blood burning. He laughed loudly and dashed down, all of his entire acquired skills burst forth onto that trunk, his entire lifetime of cultivation like a fire flame, rumbled out. The Buddhist incantation instantly dispersed. Layers of heavy pressure, like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, pressed down, blood trickled out of Ghostly's lips, his pale face suddenly another flush of red, spitted out a mouthful of fresh red blood, spraying onto the soul-devouring. Fresh blood dripping, quietly merging in, the icy-cold breath, reverberated deep from the heart. Both of his eyes turned blood red. By a hair's breadth, suddenly, the howling violent wind in the sky stopped, the god's shocking ghosts' worrying malevolent atmosphere disappeared, the figure like a celestial figure so mighty and powerful, suddenly started to waver, gradually losing strength. A dark shadow, swiftly brushed past behind Wan Jianyi and Ghostly's true ways which had long been amassed, suddenly without the pressing power, immediately burst forth, dark green and golden lights, dark red demonic power, the 3 true ways merging into one great force instantly burst up into the sky, hitting squarely onto Wan Jianyi's chest, in that instant. Sounds of bone breaking like beads falling, pi pi pa pa, sounded ceaselessly. Wan Jianyi paused in mid-air, did not flew out, only that his body out of a sudden slacked down, starting from the chest, his entire body muscles seemed to lose their support, started an irreversible shrinking. Ghostly was stunned, the next moment, he subconsciously caught Wan Jianyi's body, when his body landed in his hands, that aged body again told him, this was such a fragile old man. When the body was flipping down, he clearly saw a black palm print at the back of Wan Jianyi's body. Ghostly carrying Wan Jianyi's body, landed, he and the breathless Wan Jianyi at the same time turned back, the black figure standing among the mist which had not dispersed, it was Mr. Ghost. The glint in Ghostly's eyes were like demonic fire, burning fiercely, he coldly said, "What did you do?" Mr. Ghost ignored him and instead looked at Wan Jianyi. That old man at the brink of death was also staring at him, just that, the expression in his eyes looked a lot more complicated. The veil on Mr. Ghost's face fluttered gently, not knowing whether was it also the agitation of his state of mind, only his voice was still that emotionless. "After all these years, are you still like this? Still so trusting towards friends, not a slightest wary?" Wan Jianyi opened his mouth, looked as if he wanted to speak, but when his mouth was opened, he vomited out a mouthful of fresh blood. His face turned rapidly pale, as if life was also quietly slipping away from him. Then, he gently smiled, in the blood and pain, faintly smiled once, turned his head and looked at Ghost Lee. That look, for some reason at the moment, was instead gentle. Ghost Lee inhaled deeply. Suddenly the rim of his eyes felt hot. This old man whom a moment ago was still fighting till life and death, right now instead he did not dare to look directly at him in the eyes. He silently placed the old man down, stood up, quietly said, "If you have the Dragon Slayer's sword in your hand, I am definitely not your match." Jenny looked at this young man, both of his hands tightly clutching, his body seemed to be slightly trembling. Then, Ghost Lee turned, stared at Mr. Ghost. Mr. Ghost did not avoid his stare, even the despise, disgust and abhor look which Ghost Lee did not bother to conceal, he did not seem to care. Ghost Lee silently stared at him for a while and then without speaking, turned around and walked towards the mountain trail to Illusory Moon Cave. Soon his figure disappeared, leaving only two people at the scene. Mr. Ghost slowly walked to Jenny. The helpless old man lay on the ground, slowly raised his eyes, looked at him, blood continued to flow out from his mouth. At this moment, suddenly, footsteps sound was heard from a distance. It was someone coming up, traveling through the mist, looked like the person would soon arrive. Mr. Ghost's countenance changed, black shadow swayed, in a blink disappeared into the mist. A moment later, Lin Jingyu's figure flashed out from the mist, arrived at the scene and saw everything clearly. The faint smile instantly froze, an incredulous expression in his eyes. That old man, who had for the past decade lived with him, was covered in blood and lying weakly on the ground. Lin Jingyu dashed over, a look of despair on his face, and he totally did not discovered, behind him, a black shadow flashed past. Senior, what happened to you? What has happened? Lin Jingyu rushed to Jianyi, kneeled down, both of his hands trembling and trying to support him up, but where his hands touched, were all softness. A chill went through his heart. Lin Jingyu, like in a bottomless ice pit, felt not a single area on this elder's body where his bones were whole. Who is it? Who is it? Lin Jingyu's voice suddenly turned hoarse, his teeth biting down hard on his lips, blood flowed instantly, even his eyes were cracking with anger and despair. Senior. He cried out softly, choking, and finally cried. He never knew that he could cry. Before this weak old man, the despair 10 years old seemed to envelop him once again. Jenny weakly looked at the young man, looking at him in despair and in grief, to the extent where it could not be fake. Maybe, after all, there was still someone who was sincere to me, Jenny thought to himself. His fingers moved and then, as if the gods took pity on him, he raised his hand shakily. Lin Jingyu was shocked, grabbed his hand, anxiously said, Senior, do you have something to say? Who made you like this? I will seek revenge for you. Who is it? Jenny's face turned more and more pale. Even his breathing slowly turned low, but for some reason, his eyes turned sharper, his hand in Lin Jingyu's palm, his fingers slightly moving. Lin Jingyu was startled for a moment, looked down, in the center of his palm, that weak old finger, stained with blood, gently scrawled to sketch out the strokes, "Be careful." Suddenly, behind Lin Jingyu, in the stretch of mist, a black shadow flashed. Mr. Ghost, with his eyes glowing, stared over. Lin Jingyu was back facing Mr. Ghost and fully concentrating on Jenny's finger, sensed nothing at all. However, Jenny saw, his gaze silently met Mr. Ghost's across the distance, as if 100 years of time had passed by. The vicissitudes of life that once. Jenny suddenly smiled, a smile of blood, facing Mr. Ghost, then he shook his head. Lin Jingyu waited for a long time, but Jenny did not continue. He lifted his head in shock. Jenny's head drooped to the side. He had already stopped breathing. Lin Jingyu's body shook, both of his hands trembled, staring disbelievingly at the face which had lost its life. After a long while, he cried out loudly, "Senior." The anguish cries were heard from him who had thrown himself on the old man. Mr. Ghost stood quietly behind him, staring at the aged old face of Jenny. After a long time, quietly retreated, disappeared into the mist, from a far distance, a faint sigh was heard. Wolves howled from the foot of the mountain, carried by the wind, sharp, vicious roars continued unceasingly. At the summit of Qingyun Mountain, the crowd of human heads and shoulders stirred. The good faction members had gathered at Tongtian Peak summit. Standing at the forefront was Reverend Dao Xian, Pi Yuhong Master, and Yun Yilan etc., their faces solemn, frowning tightly, gazing down towards the foot of Qingyun Mountain. The faint smell of blood could be detected indistinctly in the wind, invoking thoughts of the innumerable cruel and vicious demon beasts below the mountain. Nobody knew, after this calamity, what would be the result. At the public square outside Crystal Hall, the crowd stirred but was silent, everyone looked solemn. It was also at this quiet moment, suddenly, a long whistle rushing to the sky was heard from a distance, like a wolf howl, like a ghost wail, sharp and piercing the sky, pressing from afar. Following the source of the sound, it seemed to be from the foot of the mountain, but the sharp cry penetrated into the clouds. For a moment everyone turned pale. The sharp cry circled and reverberated around, made a few turns at the precipitous summit in the white clouds, then slowly lowered. But when it was about to cease, abruptly below the mountain, 10,000s of the beasts roared in unison, the numerous roars towards the sky, converged as one like an avalanche. Heaven and earth changed countenance, rumbling over. The clouds with a rumble dispersed, the steep mountain peak. A mass of black gas rose from the foot of the mountain, gathering more and more, turning denser and denser, accumulated at the sky opposite Tongtian Peak, until it blocked out the sunlight. The black clouds gradually drifted to this paradise-like place. Not sure who was the first to shout out, everyone turned over. Deep inside the dark clouds, in the whipping wind, a young man dressed in bright silk clothing stood standing with his hands clasped behind, his face expressionless, indifferently watching the people at this mountain. In the eyes of the heaven and earth, what is this thing called human? He waved gently, his stare seemed to pass through this mountain. At the foot of the mountain, the thousands of beasts roared, the bloody smell came in waves, the miserable cries finally arrived. As if he had sensed something, Ghostly paused, frowned slightly and turned, facing towards the mountain before Tongtian Peak. Heavy dark clouds in the horizon, the violent winds howled, although not very far away, but the weather was completely different from the mountain behind him. The warm sunlight, spilled down from the sky, shone onto his clothes. Ghostly slowly looked away, subconsciously looked to his shoulder, but Xiao Hui was not there. This trip to the illusory moon cave, he deliberately did not bring Xiao Hui. The dangers involved were obvious, he himself was not confident too. The fight with that mysterious old man just now, although Mr. Ghost lent a hand, but Ghostly felt an inexplicable feeling towards that old man. The thousands years of Qingyun sect history, it was really a place of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Not long ago, wasn't he also a part of it? He pursed his lips with an indifferent expression, again started to walk ahead. The strips of lands beside the small path were similar to the previous path, dense woods everywhere, evergreen pine and coniferous, thick vegetation, only this mountain trail meandered forward, leading to the unknown mystery. Deep inside the woods, faint crisp sounds of the birds' cries could still be heard indistinctly. It seemed that scene of catastrophe at the mountain ahead did not have the slightest impact on this mountain. Peaceful atmosphere filled the place. Even the air was still permeated with a clear cold taste. Ghostly initially had a hint of anxiety. In this tranquil environment, very quickly his emotions became calm, to the extent that when he first lifted his head and saw illusory moon cave, the 4 words, facing one of the world's famous place, he instead did not have any slightest expression, as if looking at an ordinary mountain cave. And in fact, in front of him, it did look like an ordinary cave. Taller than half of the average person, the entrance was about 7 kai wide, appeared on a gentle hillside. Next to it was green vines and thorns. Some drooped over the entrance. When the mountain breeze blew over, the vines gently swayed. And underneath the green vines, on the stone above the entrance, engraved with 4 words. Illusory Moon Cave. Other than the meaning of these 4 words itself, the entire surroundings including these 4 words, were so unostentatious. Could it be that this was the origin of Qingyun sect for 2000 years? The book that contributed to numerous outstanding talents and heroes, including Qingyun Zi, and Qingyi founder's nameless ancient book, was it just quietly lying in here? And that world-stunning ancient sword? Ghostly silently looked at the 4 words, the time and weather-battered words seemed to be also silently staring at him. He did not speak, and did not heave any sigh. The next moment, he walked in, as if stepping into the past. It was not as deep and secluded as he had imagined. Appearing before him was a simple stone room. One glance, and he could clearly see all of the furnishings in the room. A few stones piled at a corner, the slightly damp corners of the walls had indistinct mosses. The only difference with the outside was that it was especially quiet in here. Entering the cave, it was as if everything suddenly turned quiet, like being cut off from the outside. Looking away from the surroundings, Ghostly's eyes landed on the stone wall facing the cave entrance. On the flat stone wall, a slab stone of Tai-Chi diagram was inlaid. This was the only object which could be associated with Qingyun's sect in this cave. Ghostly deeply inhaled, went up, stopped in front of the Tai-Chi diagram. There were many marks on the diagram. Most of the places had signs of damage, evidently from ages ago. Ghostly silently looked at this thing, the words of Mr. Ghost slowly reverberating in his mind. The next moment, he gently placed his hand on the Tai-Chi diagram. Faint dark green light emitted from his palm. Ghostly expressionlessly looked at the light from his hand, felt the familiar Tai-Chi Shen Qing Wei energy flowing in his body meridians, the energy that once belonged to this mountain. Like being awakened from a slumber, the peaceful atmosphere in the room was broken by a faint sound, like the entire cave dwelling was softly sighing. Something started to rotate, and then the Tai-Chi diagram also started to light up with dark green light. At the same time, the diagram started to turn from left to right exactly one round. The stone walls with a sound of ka, everything stopped. Ghostly took back his hand and quietly waited. The moment of silence disappeared instantly. Deep rumbling sounds were heard from the cave. At the right-hand side of the diagram, the perfect whole stone walls had cracks forming a ring, and then it slowly rotated to the side, opening up, revealing a secret entrance. But this entrance had a grayish-white mist-like thing floating in it. It looked like mist and also seemed to be water ripples, revolving non-stop. In it looked hazy and surreal. Ghostly looked at the water mist. Mr. Ghost after all did not lie to him. But in this mysterious water mist, who knows what was in it? He did not hesitate, like he did not even contemplate, strided in. Water mist enveloped him, his figure soon disappeared, and that two stone walls quietly rotated back this time, gently closed up, revealing not a single mark. Part 1 end here.